What about invoice discounting? What does it mean and what are the risks involved here?
Okay, Sonia, broadly, it's an extension of what P2P lending does. Honestly, out there, you were giving it to individual borrowers. Out here, there are two companies which are involved. So let's say an XYZ corporation today produces a certain amount of goods, sells it to an ABC corporation. ABC corporation can be a big company, can be an MNC or something, right? And they will have their own payment terms. So they might perhaps pay after 2 months, after 3 months, after 4 months. No company pays immediately. You have to give them credit, right? If you have to sustain in the market, that's a very common practice in the market in businesses, that you have to lend out money or you have to give credit terms. Now the XYZ company which produce the goods, manufacture it, they require constant cash to fulfill their working capital. So they are in no way to they would want the money as soon as possible, and the buyer of the goods would want the payment to be delayed as much as possible. So both the ends are very different, right? So what will one do? The seller in this case, when he raises an invoice on the buyer, he will go and put out the invoice on a platform, again an invoice discounting platform, or go to a bank. Even banks do a lot of bill discounting basically, but banks will perhaps not touch very smaller SMEs and MSMEs and very smaller organizations basically, and that's where these platforms have mushroomed. So they will actually aid these smaller companies to come to them, put up their invoices for discounting. You and I, as financiers or as lenders of money, could go choose what corporates do we want to pick up, choose the invoices which we want to discount, against what kinds of goods have those invoices being raised, and then finally, let's say if the invoice was worth 1 lakh rupee, we deduct, let's say, 15% commission. It's a 3-month kind of an invoice, so we deduct whatever 3,750 or whatever odd rupees and pay 96,250 to the seller. So he gets immediate working capital. He can kick off his business. He can produce his next shipment or whatever next tranche of goods. You make 15% return for 15% per annum return for 3 months put together. And when the payment is released by the buyer, that payment comes back to you. So that's the cycle. Now, just by listening to the cycle, you can make out there are many loose ends in the entire cycle, right? So there are many things which
Many
can go wrong
risks,
in this.
right? I mean, I feel invoice discounting seems to be a little more risky than P2P lending, because in invoice discounting you're sort of putting your money in the hands of a business, and however good the company may be, however good the promoters are, at the end of the day business cycles change on a dime, right? I mean, suddenly a pandemic comes through and businesses have just come crashing down. So would you advise staying away strictly from invoice discounting, or do you still see some potential here?
Look, Sonia, so this has been recognized by not the platforms I'm saying, but this practice of bill discounting. RBI has also given some form of credence to this practice. They have introduced a platform called Trends, which is trade receivables invoice discounting platform. And there is a platform called M1 Exchange, which RBI initially started with, where smaller MSMEs and SMEs can go and discount their bills, and financiers who can be large corporates or large individuals or HNIs or even banks can go and do the bill discounting program out there, right? Now, you have to understand one thing. The companies which are coming on other platforms or private platforms are the ones which have been refused by banks. They're not getting the invoice discounting or the bill discounting or the factoring part from the banks. They are too small in size, and that's the reason why they're going on to these platforms. So any which ways, those are in the highest form of risk, and perhaps the ones which are struggling for cash flows basically, and that's the reason why they've come onto these platforms. So the risk any which ways is exorbitantly high which you are taking. You are relying on a contract of a service or a delivery of goods to be happening in 3 months. That contract can go wrong anytime. Perhaps you might not be able to produce the goods, ship it as properly. There could be quality defects. There could be some minor clauses in the contract which you don't know, which you're not aware of, which could result in delay in payments, which could result in a company deducting some amount while paying the final invoice, which could result in a company actually putting up some penalty clauses in something, right? So you don't know those things, those minor details or intricacies around the contract. So
Absolutely.
obviously there is a lot of risk